There we are. What's up, James?
Jason, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Outbound 2.0. Really excited to have you on. For those not familiar, James Godwin is a 3X sales leader. He's going to be sharing some insights today on educating sales and marketing on their markets, not just the product they're selling, as well as turning sales reps into subject matter experts, deep conversations with their prospects, and then the systems, not tech, required to put these strategies in place. So we were chatting a little bit before we hopped on. James, these are near and dear to my heart, and things that it's always forever going to be a mystery to me that like this is not the way everybody does it. But nevertheless, it is the way the majority of people run these, with silos between teams, and not enough communication, not enough alignment, all of that stuff. And having been a demand gen marketing leader for pretty much my entire career, like I know how hard it can be to do that, and it's not something you solve by tech. It's not something that you can just say, hey, we got a new tool, and that's going to do it. So kick us off here. Where did your interest in this really originate from? What were you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, so part of my experience, and really happy to be here. Love the Rev Genius community and all of the content that we're pushing out here. It's just fantastic. Part of my experience is really informed by jumping between industries, and that's been seen kind of as a little bit of a negative. I've spoken with folks that I work with on a client basis, and part of the concern is always like, well, you don't really have experience in real tech. Well, you don't really have experience in as much experience in fintech that we're looking for. I think a lot of the time, SDRs, account executives, marketing managers, customer success managers will get that same response, in the interview process. Like, well, you don't really know the industry. And I just find that fascinating, right? I mean, especially considering that I've jumped industries 4 different times, crushed goals in every single role. And it really is by taking a methodical approach at understanding the industry, especially not just the product that I'm selling. But for whatever reason, we tell all of our new sales reps to just be stupid about the market and get smart on the product. And still we expect people to just go out and solve problems, not sell the product. It's just totally upside down.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think a strong argument could be made that the bulk of what we've been doing the last 15, 20 years has been upside down. What were the industries that you jumped across?
Sure. So, I mean, I could sound like a Johnny Cash song for, I've sold everywhere. Excluding my early, bouncing around between early, entry stage sales positions, ad tech for sure. So, ad space, ad tech. And then beyond that, really into the publishing space, sold into cybersecurity. I've sold into online retail for offering extended warranties at the point of sale. So it's regardless of where you're working, and then real tech a little bit. Regardless of where you're working, the problem is the same. That you've got people who have problems that they aren't aware of. At least if you're selling correctly, right? If you have solid product market fit, it's about solving problems that people didn't even really realize that they existed, and then coming to them with a solution. But how can you contextualize that without really understanding the broader picture? So I like to think about it kind of like a philosophy class, right? I don't know, Jason, if you took poli sci, right? We're going out into the deep end. Did you ever take any philosophy courses back in the day?
I'm laughing because I'm all but dissertation for a doctorate in philosophy, and I'm teaching a business ethics class at UT right now.
Nice. So we could talk about John Locke and the 2 treatises and go to town.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Let's not for this one, but maybe another day. But it's very similar to that, right? I mean, so if you're ABD, then you've certainly been in the deep end on discourse. Like, how do you learn philosophy?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly the way I run my classes. I mean, it's hey, it's very much a Socratic method of like, hey, let's throw this out here, let's think it through. What's your argument around it? Hey, that's your thought or reaction to it or opinion. Now back it up
Yep.
What would you say to me as a devil's advocate relative to this? We were doing this relative to marketing ethics as far as deception, manipulation, and autonomy last night, actually,
Nice.
which for me is actually one of the most fun like business ethics pieces or topics you go into, because I think very little goes into that respect for autonomy, respect for people's decision making better than marketing. And holy hell, is it like a very great giant gray area. It's like it's really hard to find where you plant your sand or plant your flag in the sand relative to those things.
Yep. 100%. 100%.
So one of the things that you mentioned there was product market fit. In my experience, like one of the most effective ways for gauging and dialing in product market fit is getting alignment between sales and marketing, so they're having that two-way conversation. Talk through sort of what you've seen on that side.
Sure. I mean, so having reached across the aisle and actually grown a couple of marketing, business development teams, rev ops teams, as well as sales, it's pretty ironic how much we expect marketing and sales to work so well together. Yet from the start, the way that we position it, we kind of pit them against each other. Right? I mean, marketing does research and understands the problem just in terms of, we have our product marketing, we have, competitive analysis and, battle card creation, which leads into our sales enablement teams to supposedly equip our salespeople with what the information that they need just in time, at the right point. But it needs to be a continuous loop. At the same time, what I've seen, right, to answer your question, is that we don't really empower our salespeople to join that conversation. Yet we want them to just give us the intel that they received, like a recording machine. It's like, no. We're not interested in your opinion. Just tell us what the customer said. It's like, you're not smart enough to join the conversation. Just tell us what the customer said. And
yeah, and I think that
highlights.
Yeah, I mean, I think that highlights one of the things we led with, which is like tooling is not the answer. And in a lot of cases, tooling is exacerbating the problem. So if you're using like recording tools like a Gong or a Course or something like that, then oftentimes operationally the answer is like, hey, we're going to give marketing access to the calls. And now sales is those actual salespeople are completely out of the loop.
That's right.
It's just marketing going and like, hey, yep, we don't need to talk to you. We've got access to the calls. We're reviewing those. So we've got everything that you could give us.
That's right. Well, and of course, with the way that artificial intelligence is exploding right now, there's of course going to be even deeper debate around, well, what about the analysis that AI is going to be able to supplement based off from, conglomerated calls over the course of, the last, 120 days. We can get VOC, feedback, just straight from AI. It's like, no, you can't. There's still, I will out wordsmith ChatGPT any freaking day, right, on my outbound emails. Or really any part of the sales cycle. And I'll also be able to connect the dots just with the human element. We need to be able to also give that permission to our salespeople. But it's more than just, at least from my perspective, like we start to see exponential returns on that when we give sales SDRs, customer success managers even, right? I mean, I know this is like, how to equip your sales and marketing team, but it really moves throughout the entire customer life cycle. Is giving our people on the front lines permission to be smart enough to have an opinion, right? Rather than just being jarheads to, fire whatever wordsmithing we've done. We may be equipping them with a banana without knowing it.
100%. And it, what you just highlighted there, as far as like a full funnel, full life cycle process, you'll never forget whenever growth as a concept first started coming out of Silicon Valley, came out of Facebook originally and, sort of proliferated from there. It was like, oh, holy shit, there's a name to this thing that I've been doing. It's like, so people are actually catching on. There's a philosophy to it. There's a way to actually be able to operationalize this, all this stuff. But yeah, and I mean, I think I owe most of it to the fact that, I grew up in bootstrap startups. The bulk of my career has been in bootstrap startups. So like, it was never a luxury to be able to say like, I'm not worried about revenue, or I'm not worried about how well this stuff converts. I never had the ability to say like, yeah, I'm just I'm just focused on lead volume, or I'm just focused on MQLs, or whatever else. Like, I had no choice but to track this shit all the way down to closed one, and then all the way even down into, how's the product performing relative to new features being rolled out, what's happening with churn, you name it. And huge things happen whenever you get alignment, not just between sales and marketing, but through the entire life cycle. And I think that is one of the, I think people are starting to at least get the message or ask the questions around sales and marketing. But of course, as it gets more complex and you add more people into the equation, then it takes longer to sort of get arms around. But that's really where it starts to accelerate, in my experience, is that, the more that you get that integrated across, the better it is.
Totally
but
agree.
Too, like the complexity of that, like how do you tackle the complexity of getting alignment between these different departments and being able to, have people actually track and optimize through the entire life cycle?
Yeah, I mean, I think the right answer to that is going to depend on the size and stage of the organization that you're at, not so much the industry. I mean, we already talked about my opinion there, but really, are you aligning the 500 people, or are you aligning 20 people at a seed or a Series A? And either way, I think the answer, at least in different ways, is you start small. You start small. You start simple. Um, and and again, like you've got to slow down. And here come the platitudes, right? You got to slow down to speed up, and slow is smooth, smooth is fast, right? So, but breaking that down into tactics, right? So, like outside of platitudes, um, you have to give people time. Like how much time are we spending training our sales reps and our SDRs and customer success managers on the product, right? A ton, right? A lot goes into that. They're training typically, I mean, we'll say it's an intensive 2 to 4 weeks training program, especially in SaaS, but service very similarly. We'll say it's 2 to 4 weeks, but really education continues over the first 90 to 180 days just on the product. And of course, that depends on what your role is as a salesperson. And this is another good example. You're told, well, don't get too technical on the product, right? And to an extent, I agree with that. I want people to be able to whip out a solid, shiny, customized demo to a particular buying persona's problems and have an engaged, value additive conversation. But I don't necessarily, if we're talking about a technical product like in cybersecurity, I don't expect them to be able to understand the complexities of making API calls. But I do expect them to understand the importance of making API calls and how that works into the overall ecosystem of problems that their buying persona is trying to solve. And so it's really taking a step back from there, because we all started like prospecting. It's like, okay, if I give you a workbook of buying personas and I tell you what these people are trying to solve for and what their pain points are, that's a good starting point, but you need to have deeper context around that. And you need to not just take someone else's word for it. That's why I brought up the whole idea of like the analogy of a philosophy class. You don't go into poli-sci, read Kant and Locke and Schopenhauer depressed me for weeks, right? But you don't read those and then be given a statement opinion on, and this is what they mean, and that's the end of the course. Congratulations, you now have passed philosophy. The whole point is that you come to class prepared to discourse, because these problems are in we're not talking about data at rest for problems that we're solving. Like, this is data in motion, right? The problems are continually evolving. Look at how rapid the market of artificial intelligence is going. Like, we've got people who still think that it's just a fancy toy. No, people, this is search engines and internet 2.0, right? So like there's the problems and the solutions that our customers have to solve those problems is rapidly changing. So we have to create a foundation to make the regular discourse of understanding the market that we're selling into a regular part of how we train and how we enable our workforce. So happy to bounce back and forth on that, but we can also just jump into some practical application.
Yeah, no, before we jump into practical application, I mean, one, You couldn't preach to me better than talking about start simple. Holy crap, like you take it down to the most simple basic thing. You start there, you work out the kinks, you figure out if it's working or not, and then you layer complexity, but you layer complexity only as needed. Like I hammer my teams with this all the time. It's like, all right, what is the most basic thing we're trying to accomplish or solve for? What is the most basic way we can get something out the door around that? And then let's figure out,
Yep.
did that work? Did it not? Are there lessons to be learned there? And then only then, all right, what's the actual next thing we need to be able to better solve this? And is the effort that it takes to implement that worth the gain that we're looking at there? But, if you start too complex, like not only are you setting yourself up for failure, because it's likely to break down because you've got too many pieces in there, but it's also damn near impossible to figure out what actually caused it to break down. Versus if you're just slowly, methodically adding layers to it, it's like, okay, that new layer is what changed. And it's interacting with something where it in and of itself is broken. And so that's where we need to focus. And so you've got a
Yep.
much more limited number of breadcrumbs you're having to go trace and follow down with.
Right.
So before we get into like some of the tactical side of it, how do you solve for this at a little bit of a meta level? What's your take on how we wound up in this mess?
I think it's where we came from, as an industry, and I want to call it, as an industry in revenue. Sales really did used to be a much less technical challenge. I always think that I was born in the wrong, decade. Go back, 50 years, and it would be just like, I don't know, taking candy from a baby just doesn't sound right, because I mean that's just me, right? But something at that level, the art of the profession of sales and marketing, and to your point earlier, I call it revenue marketing. I mean, it's we've come out with like product marketing and brand marketing, and growth marketing. It's revenue marketing. If you're in marketing and you're not focused on the Benjis, then it's not right. But yeah, I mean, I think it's gotten more complex, and not just because of the tech, but because of the advent of information. I mean, it really was only, it's really only in the last decade that the access to information that customers have and prospects have is just mind blowing. It's mind blowing. So by the time you're making it to your customer, they already know who you are. They may actually know who you personally are by the time that you're making it to them. And they know about your products. They know about the competitors. They know about, they've seen previews, which is, universes away from where they would have been even just 5 years ago. And what that causes is really a necessity. It's what customers need, right? Because like that's what sales has always been about. Sales is a helping profession, right? And go givers sell more, and it's by giving to your customers and helping them solve problems. But the problems that they need to solve are now more advanced. They're further along in the buying process. They don't need help with what you can read off from a one-page document, right? They need help thinking. They need help seeing around corners that they didn't see around yet. So to do that, we have to assume that even the jarheads that we put on the front line with the banana, they got to know how to engage in that conversation. Cold email is dead and cold call isn't dead. But if you get someone on the phone who has actually 5 minutes to engage with you, you better be packing value other than just, whatever, objection handling lines or openers that you wrote down, because now you're in a real conversation. And I'm going to measure the value of what your company can bring based off from what your SDR can actually converse with me about in that first 5 minutes.
100%.
But we haven't really kept up with that in terms of how we organize as a team. And so the expectations have just moved so much more rapidly than the systems, not the tech, than the systems that we've put in place in order to really make those teams work as a single unit.
Yeah, that's one of the things that will forever be a head scratcher for me, is how an entire industry in space could think that, hey, the people that are responsible for having the first human conversation with a prospect, let's make those our least experienced salespeople. Let's go hire people straight out of college. They've never had a
Right.
job before, much less a sales job. That's who we want on the front line having the first conversation with somebody. It's like, really, that who came up with that one? It was like that's the plan. That's what we go do.
Right. Well, because it used to be a numbers game, right? So it was about reaching as many people as you possibly can, and about volume, volume, volume. So in order to scale volume, well, I mean, what we tell ourselves is, I don't have time to train 20 BDRs on how to be experts in the market. James, you're kidding me. Like you're nuts. I need to get those folks trained on how to pitch the product, on how to say these 10 things, and then here's their call script, right? We treat SDRs and account executives, especially for inside sales, often like it's a call center. It's just not. And also, call centers suck. I mean, really, like, when
Yes,
was the
they
last time
do.
you had a good experience in a call center?
That's if you
So
can even get to a human being.
anymore, right? You can't. You can't.
Absolutely.
I was trying to I was trying to reach optimum yesterday. Seriously, smashing zero, man. Like I ended up asking ChatGPT, what is the fastest way I can get someone from optimum, a real live human being, on the phone? It's like, hey, it actually worked.
I just discovered the Amex concierge service for like trying to book things or like deal with stuff, secure tickets or whatever. And I was like, I'm gonna abuse the hell out of this. It's like, you mean I don't have to go navigate all of this stuff over telephone?
That's right.
It's like, all right, yep. I'm just gonna call it and have somebody else do that for me.
There you go,
Absolutely. So
man.
it sounds
Hey,
like
start Life Hacks by Jason. I'll follow it.
so it sounds like a lot of what you think as far as like the breakdown of what's going on between sales and marketing was sparked by tech and primarily by the tech and both the tech on the internal business side, but even more primarily the tech enabled for the actual customer, the actual prospects, and the amount of information that they have at their fingertips and can get their fingers to. And so in a very real sense, marketers have been moved downstream whether they want to or not, and so they're doing more and more stuff that used to be more under the purview of a salesperson, because the salesperson was involved earlier in that user journey. And so, would that be a correct interpretation that that's a lot of what's driven this?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. And just our expectations as people, in terms of our day to day experience, right? I mean, a funny conversation, right? Talking about Amex's concierge service, but even shopping on Amazon, right? When you're chatting with someone, you expect the first person out, right? I mean, it is a suboptimal experience if the first person you talk to can't solve your problem. And so think about that, right? Just as like people living our daily lives, just doing the things that we do, right? And that's the same for CEOs or CROs or SDRs. You expect the first person you talk to be able to help you solve your problem. And so you're
I
you're
don't
picking up the
anymore, but
phone, you're picking up the phone and calling out, and all you know is the banana that somebody gave you, but the person you get on the other end of the phone could probably bill $1,000 an hour for the meetings that they're on or more, and you can't help them solve their problem. That's a bad experience right out of the gate. Right. So, I think it really is just expectations, set on it like over time. And we haven't really seen how far down the ocean we've drifted.
yeah. No, I mean, one of my biggest pet peeves is having to deal with tier one technical support, because it's like I've run
Yeah.
systems and revenue ops and stuff like that my entire career. It's like if I'm writing in, it's like it's a real issue. And and then my biggest pet peeve is when I know everything they're gonna ask and need. And in my very first message, I share everything that they need, and then they take me back through having to give them every bit of that piecemeal all over again. My
and,
favorite was
and that is still what 97% of discovery calls are.
yeah. No, I mean,
Right.
I had one like a month ago, and I wrote in exactly that. Like, gave them screenshots, everything they needed. Took me through that. I need this and this and this. I was like, well, it's up there. Here it is again. And then they looked at it and they're like, no, nope. I need the real version of this that has the copy that you wanted in the message that was supposed to go out automatically. this doesn't align with what you showed me in settings. I was like, ding, ding, ding. That's exactly why I wrote in.
That's right. That's awesome.
But
Oh,
cool.
man.
So yeah, we've clearly established that there's a problem here. And if it was easy to go solve for, then I think more people would hopefully have tackled this. What are some of the things you've seen that have been effective for teams that, okay, if they're sitting here listening to us and it's like, this sounds an awful lot like us, but where do we go? What do we do to try and turn this battleship? Because it's been the way it's been done for however long. We've got stuff that's ingrained in, and processes created and people trained and all of that stuff.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm going to go with, again, start small. So this isn't about enrolling the entire company in a syllabus on on discourse. You can't afford to stop the entire ship. Really is about and I do believe at some point everybody should be able to take your analogous poli-sci course on whatever market you're in. Again, this is not about the product. It's about the market that you're in, where your buyer personas live and breathe and work every day. So I think step one is getting current and equipping yourself with a couple of publications. It's so let's say you're creating a syllabus, and you can do this whether or not you're an individual SDR. If you've got it's a lot more helpful to do this with at least one other running buddy. So if you are an SDR and you've got another, somebody else, it could be another SDR, it could be a CSM, but really what you're looking for is the opportunity to eventually, very quickly, create scheduled time for discourse. So short story time. I was working with the VP of sales, and we were talking about we're going through and doing some reviews on some call coaching for some of his reps that week. And we came up on a couple of things that we had come up on for a couple of weeks in a row. And I was like, okay, so, clearly our role play here isn't really super effective. What do we think is missing? And he was, kind of tilted his head, like, role play. I'm like, well, you are doing, role play on this, on a daily basis, right? It's like, well, it's like, when is the last time you did role play? A couple weeks ago. Right. So like for first step, you have to make role play a regular part of how you train. Professionals train every day. You sure as heck better be role playing. And I know like it's going to feel funny at first if this is not part of your daily rhythm, but that's step one. You got to get comfortable practicing before you get on the phone with your customers. All right. So let's just assume that is your prerequisite course to your poli-sci course, right? That we're making the syllabus for, right? Prereq, role play every day, right? Even if it's just one role play. So then you're making a quick syllabus, and there's a couple of things that you're going to put on that list. Super easy. You're going to go for 2 regular publications that you follow. All right, and we're going to get to, well, how do I find those? How do I find those? We'll talk about that. So 2 regular publications. You're going to want 5 most read articles, the things that keep getting passed around in terms of, anytime someone talks about this industry, this is one of the things that they point to. 2 of the most read guides. And then also you want to know, well, what's the lingo, right? You want to make sure that you're staying current and you know how to blend in. If you want extra credit, I would say you want to look for a couple actual books on a topic, because there's going to be gurus anywhere you go, right? Just like we have in sales and marketing. I've got a whole library. I don't really talk about all the books that I've read, but it helps, right, to get outside of your own head and outside of the vacuum chamber of your mind to understand how other people do things. And so that same thing exists in those industries. So that's really your syllabus, right? I mean, in terms of what you're reading, then you need to schedule some time on a regular basis. And I usually start with 5 1-hour discussions. So you want to jumpstart it. All right. So during your first week of actually digging in, then you're going to have 5 1-hour sessions of 5 hours that you're dedicating. That's it, with premeditated questions that you want to talk about with your study partner. I guarantee you your level of preparedness on how you're speaking with your customers or how you're working together with your marketing team if you're in sales or if you're in customer success, or maybe even just how informed you are creating buyer personas if you're in marketing. You're going to 10x that just by taking a little bit of time for your first week. And then you schedule one follow-up week after that. And that 1 hour every week after that, as part of your atomic rhythm, that 1 hour is to discuss your current events. All right. So those publications that we talked about at the beginning, you're staying up to speed on that. So you're having interested conversation around like, hey, I saw this article. I definitely want to talk about that. You bookmark it, you come to your 1 hour meeting, and you have some discussion, and you debate, right? You ply yourself, but without taking practice on applying your intellect on the industry and all of the problems that are being discussed, you're not going to have the right context for what you are bringing to the table for helping your customers solve problems.
Yeah, I love the idea of branching out beyond the echo chamber of your specific industry or tool or whatever, and being able to incorporate that in. Other ideas or tactics relative to, well, I mean, let me back up here. So you shared the example of working with was it a VP of sales around this?
Yep.
And so I would imagine the goal there was to get him leveled up, and then that would be transferred to the team underneath him. Would that be accurate?
It was actually to take his 5 most underperforming SDRs and start here.
Got it.
Right? We get so nose to the grindstone on looking at numbers or objection handling, doing the same thing that we've been doing over and over again. We don't stop to maybe think about some of the fundamentals. This goes back to really training. So there's one other concept in here too, is what are we telling our up and coming professionals in our space when we say come in but don't have an opinion? Like, what are we communicating to them just psychologically? Like, come in, only say all the things that I taught you to say, don't have an opinion, because that doesn't matter. All right? We teach people that they're not smart. Really. Like, I don't think that you're smart enough to have an opinion. And so a lot of it is, this actually was a really solid breakthrough for one of the best CSMs on one of my teams that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. And real smart dude, but never gave himself permission to have an opinion about solving problems when working with his customers. And that was a breakthrough. It's just like, I get to have an opinion, but the most important piece on the flip side of that is you get to fucking be wrong, right? You get to say wrong things, and that's okay, right? Because it's the takeaway is you've got to engage, right? You have to care about the problems you're selling. Otherwise, you're just selling a widget, and 50% of winning a deal is giving a damn.
Oh, absolutely. So what do we do with managers that have been either trained or they're really only comfortable with that sort of micromanagement, everything needs to fit within a template type mindset, so that they can understand, because it's a very different motion. It's a very different way of approaching managing teams, stuff like that. I mean, I know from experience, I've worked with CEOs that expected me to do that. Hey, I need a morning and evening, daily sales report. I need, to know everything that you're doing. It needs to all be on script. I need to be able to go and monitor that. I need to, and that is not me. Suffice it to say, he and I didn't work together for very long, because I was like, this ain't going to work. But because the other way, the way that I typically manage it, and I tell my team members as I'm interviewing them, I was like, and this goes back to like, primarily working at bootstrap startups, but even in venture back, like this has been the case more often than not. It's like, I'm interviewing to fill a position because we're one of two things. We're lacking expertise or we're lacking bandwidth. And it's usually a combination of both. And the implications for that is nobody here has time to hold your hand, spoon feed you, look over your shoulder, whatever. Like, I am hiring somebody, I'm hopefully hiring you to come in here and be the expert when it comes to this piece of the pie that you are expected to manage. And I was like, you're going to be given full autonomy to go execute against that. I fully expect that you're going to make mistakes. All that I ask is that we have tracked and measured what went into that mistake so that we can figure out how that, that happened and learn lessons from it, and that we don't make the same mistake again. It's not saying that we're not going to make a mistake relative to whatever that thing is we're trying to do, because we absolutely are. But let's not go be idiots and go do the same thing all over again whenever we already established it doesn't work. But it's a very different mindset. It's a very different approach to management and go to market than the other side of it. So, what do we do with, that management layer that doesn't have that experience or doesn't understand how that works, or is really uncomfortable with that lack of control?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's not a this or. I'd say it's probably more of a this and. Right. So if you're uncomfortable letting go, it's not that you can't, dig into call scripts and conversion rates and open numbers and, your pipeline velocity. I mean, yeah, I still expect every VP of sales to know all of those metrics cold, right? I mean, it's not like you're not paying attention to that, or VP marketing, right? Depending on the the product model. But it's about understanding that there are influences to, let's say, pre-influence the success that your reps are going to have. How do you get 90% plus success rate when you hire SDRs and account executives and CSMs? It's not just because you're a rock star at finding A players. It's because you have a rock solid system of training and enabling any player that you bring onto your bench. They still have to be capable and driven in order to do that, but most people are. And I would say it's not for everybody. Right?
No, it's definitely not. In fact, I find it to be oftentimes fairly binary between and both sides of the equation. The managers that are comfortable with it, as well as the team members who are okay with that. I mean, there's plenty of people out there that are like, I want to be, thoroughly trained and brought in, and this is the playbook, and I'm not expected to depart heavily from it, and all steps are mapped out. And so it's like, gonna come in, punch my ticket, do what's expected of me, and then leave. And I mean, obviously there's a lot more required as far as like creativity and paying attention and sort of hey, how could we might do this better and stuff like that. And so for the most part, like, people that haven't been a fit with that other model have self-selected out on me and done that pretty quickly. And so, I think there's room for both sides of it, but I think there's also sort of an innate, comfort level and, way that you sort of approach things on both sides of the equation.
For sure. For sure. And I would say anyone who wants to, dip their toe in the water, just drop me a connect on LinkedIn. Drop me a DM, or reach out to me on the Rev Genius community, and I'm happy to drop a very simple template and a set of instructions on how to walk through. That it's really a simple, like 2-3 step process. Like, number 1, create a syllabus. Number 2, create a study group. Number 3, set a schedule, and create a habit of giving yourself permission. And I'd say, like, well, all right, so 4 steps. Give yourself, permission to have an opinion and be wrong. And, rinse, repeat, do that on a regular basis. You would be surprised. And that's training you cannot record, right? So that's not,
right.
Give somebody access to Gong, library all of your best calls, listen to these, and now you too can go sell, or now you too know everything. It's about giving yourself an opportunity to build muscle where customers expect it to have an optimal experience. That's why we're doing it. And that's why it leads to higher performance rates. So if you're looking for, like, where's the ROI as a sales leader or a marketing leader or a CS leader, it's because customers expect this now. So if you're not doing it, guess what? Your A players who are crushing their goals, it's just because they've gone out and figured how to do this all on their own, plus a bunch of other shit. I'm not saying, like, this is the only thing. Right. But, like, if you're not doing this, you can't do the stuff that comes after it. And A players in the entire revenue core understand that.
Yep, absolutely. And I think, back to sort of your start simple model, one of the most effective ways I've had of doing navigating this, especially relative to different fits and comfort levels with it, is I'll usually find, and most of the time they come to me or like they raise their hand in some way that it's like, okay, yep, that's who it is. But I'll try and find like two, three members of the team that are like really dialed in, like they're asking questions, they're pushing back, they're providing insights. They're interested in what we're doing on the marketing and demand gen side. They're finding ways. How can I leverage this? And that's my skunk works. That's my go-to team. And so as we're testing new things, as we're figuring out new initiatives, especially when it requires alignment between roles and departments, I'll go to them, I'll bring them in, use them to work out the kinks. And it's back to that complexity thing. So I've only got like 2, 3 cats I'm herding, not a team of like a dozen. Where it's like, okay, are they not following directions? Is it user error? Is it like, hey, there's something actually fundamentally broken here that we need to address? Whatever. But we'll work out all of those kinks, and then this is the critical part. We'll actually get a MVP out the door and gather some data around it. Because holy shit,
Right.
you want to see a sales team adopt and incorporate something new, put some wins from their peers in front of the rest of the team. And it's like, all right, yep, we're going to go do that. And so
Yep.
that's how you roll it out. That's how you get it into a place where it's ready to, at least in my experience.
Absolutely. And I think talking about, well, what's one of the next steps, in terms of beyond individual rep success and enablement, what's one of the next steps in terms of seeing the benefits for that across your revenue org? And if you've now scheduled 1 hour a week for current event discourse, you can, again, like thinking about building atomic habits here, you can schedule in another hour, let's say every 2 weeks, to it's a 2-part meeting to share between marketing. So marketing is now, and you can call it whatever excellence team, your revenue excellence team internally. uh Marketing is sharing what they've learned, and sales is sharing what they've learned, right? It's a bi-directional training session, not, okay, salespeople, tell us what the customer said, but okay, salespeople, tell us what you think. And we've now equipped everybody on the team. So going back to our poli-sci analogy here, how fucking annoying was it when that one ding dong in your class shows up and they didn't read the material, but they still just can't keep themselves from raising their hand and having a goddamn opinion, right? Salespeople, unless you do this, that's you, right? Like, and you have to earn permission to have the opinion, but it's not that much work. You just have to be invested in being informed, and it comes from more than the demos that you're doing and the single customers that you're speaking with. But if you do that, man, we can really just pour some rocket fuel on this thing, right? And I think your sales and your marketing teams can start having a really good time.
Yeah, I mean, nothing's going to encourage people to keep doing something like success. But we spent the bulk of the time talking about like the sales side of the equation. How do you get the salespeople to a place where they can start
Sure.
identifying insights, being able to pass that back. But of course, you've got to have a willing and engaged marketing team on the other side of the equation. It takes two to tango. So
Yeah.
how do you drive alignment between those two, especially given that you're as likely as not to have a marketer on the other side that like all of this is completely alien to them too?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is letting go a little bit of control, right, and letting go of the outcome, and understanding that your expertise is being the Sherpa of the journey, right? When you're talking about, for example, if you pop quizzed most of your sales team, you'd probably get a different answer from every other one about what buyer personas are supposed to be used for. Most of them think it's a marketing tool. So marketing's over here doing all of this work that's just kind of going out into the ether. And so when we talk about equipping marketing folks, I think also, I think everybody right now is suffering from the do more with less itis, in corporate America. And so we spend less time, we give ourselves less and less time and permit less and less permission to invest in the foundational habits that lead to better, more efficient work. And so for marketers, if you popped quizzed your marketing team, how many of them have actually gone out and read the 2 leading publications in the industry? So not like, so for example, and I went through this exercise, it took me 5 minutes. So just for everyone's like, oh God, I got to create a fucking syllabus, James. It's like, it takes you 5 minutes. All right. So here's how you do it. And it's great for marketers too. So if you pop quiz marketers, how many of them have actually gone through and done this? Step 1, and I know this is funny, I think it's funny, open up ChatGPT. All right, so step 1. Step 2, you've got a list of questions that you're asking chat, right? I'm just on a first name basis with chat. So you're asking chat, what are some of the online publications most read by, all right, targeted persona in industry where targeted persona works. All right, go read those. All right, go subscribe to those. And same thing for books, right? What are the 2 most read guides consumed by targeted persona in this industry that explain how to be the most successful targeted persona? Go read those books. All right, and if you don't like reading, ask chat to provide you a 1-page summary of the book. Right? It really is just about taking time to invest in understanding, really truly understanding perspectives, not just you can get in some pretty surface level research. And I'm not saying marketers are necessarily once, and then how often do we actually come back to our buying persona? Probably only after our CEO has the next new amazing idea and says, we've got to change our buying persona. And then you go update, right? And we should take more agency in being the Sherpas of that journey on buying personas and bringing our sales reps into the conversation, bringing our CSMs into the conversation and saying, hey, once every 2 weeks, we're going to talk about what you've learned in the industry. And we're going to have a discourse around whether or not different parts of the buying persona can still be validated with what people are trying to solve for today. And guess what? There's more than one buying persona you should be using and discussing. So you've got a lot of material and a lot of work to do. It's not a lack of opportunity for work. It's that we just get busy doing all of the busy stuff before we slow down and think about, okay, how can we simplify this a little bit?
Yep. So let's use that new buying persona as a good example here. New buyer persona is getting tossed around as a potential like new target, primary target, whatever. If hope to God you're doing some sort of testing evaluation around that. And so you need both a analytical approach, which is typically in the hands of the marketing team because they've got the tools, they've got the background, and they've got in particular the volume to be able to generate anything interesting from a data or analytic standpoint. And then you have like the subjective, anecdotal side of it, largely from the sales team. Obviously, it takes some nuance to effectively marry those two, and there's a lot of danger and risk in going too far one way or another. Any advice on how you navigate that or how you balance those, or is it mostly going to be contextual?
I mean, a little bit of both. Don't experiment with more than 1 or 2 things at a time. All right, because you really don't need to in order to move the needle. So I think the contextual piece is, well, what's getting updated in the persona? Is it an entire shift? Is it a new persona that you're bringing into a targeted, curated buying buying decision team? Is it a shift in a buying persona? So let's say, for example, economic downturn of 2023. All right, and everybody's shaking their hands in the air and saying, "Oh, the sky is falling." Well, so are most of the CFOs that are out there right now. And so CFOs, although they've been a buying persona in most of your buying decision teams, whether or not you knew it, they are now playing the more prominent role in actually be made more often than not. So, I mean, especially if you're talking about anything from tech or service, CFOs have given a lot of marching orders in the last just couple of months on go consolidate this, go find $250,000 or go find a couple $1,000,000 on your P&L and figure out how to shave that off. And they're handing those orders out to the rest of the cabinet, and who are then handing that out to their VPs or directors. Depends, of course, on how big your company is. So if you haven't revisited your financial executive buying persona in terms of where they sit in a targeted buying decision team, then you probably should. But before you do that, go to your 1-hour sesh that you have now scheduled every 2 weeks, and you should have whoever your mid-level or executive sponsor is from marketing there, along with your mid-level or executive sponsor with sales inside of your organization as chaperones. But the people contributing to the discussion need to be your boots on the ground, right? I want my SDRs and I want my AEs participating in that conversation, and that does two things. Number one, it accelerates the flow of real-time knowledge from the front lines. Number two, it gives my sales reps and my marketing people, but especially the people who are customer facing on a regular basis, it gives them real-time reps, push-ups, right? In terms of building muscle on having an opinion with an audience. What do you think they need to do in terms of building gravitas and expertise to be able to pitch to a boardroom or do a multi-person demo or be surprised with having more than one, influencer on on an outbound call? It's like, oh, let me loop somebody in. Well, if you don't have any practice with that, that's really tough. And so you're really getting some solid role play out, but also you're accelerating information. You're building a collaborative environment. Like, people are just going to have a better time working there, wherever that happy place is, that they were like, oh, maybe we should do this. And that's just for updating, whatever personas you want on that basis. So as you start to understand that things shift based off from the research that you're doing, add them into the agenda, go into your biweekly meeting, and now you've got great conversation. But you're not going to be as informed as you should be if you're not continuing to consume current information in that marketplace. Because that's a pretty big generalization about CFOs, and I don't know, maybe that's not the case in sneaker land.
Cool. So we've got just a few minutes left, and we've got one last question that I want to end with, and then
Sure.
we can wrap up, let everybody know where to be able to find you and reach out to you. So like we touched on, nothing sells like a new process or a new concept like success. Take us through in a few minutes the best example that whether it's a place you've worked with, somebody that you've trained or consulted with, just something that you heard anecdotally, that where somebody has actually actualized this and did it at sort of a world-class level.
Sure. I would say, taking the example of a cybersecurity vendor and working with pretty limited budget in terms of the level of sales talent that they were able to bring through the door, right? At least at first. You've got a headcount model, you have territory, you've got sales folks you need to bring on board, but you don't have the funds in terms of bringing on folks who have, how we typically solve this problem, right? I'm going to go find someone with 10 years of experience in this industry so that they just know what to do. And so, looking at, a different way to solve that problem of implementing the system, one of the things that we started off with was, creating a syllabus, both for current reps on board, but also the new hiring class. And everybody basically got to join in and start having discourse on this. Now, what was interesting, it didn't work for every rep, right? I mean, not everybody's going to be able to keep up, and it's going to start to explode their brains a little bit when they start solving problems about, identity access management or, cloud access security brokering or encryption or all this stuff that you need to think about as a chief information security officer if you're selling cybersecurity SaaS. But gosh, even if they were behind, if they didn't sound 10 times more prepared going into every single call, and yeah, I mean, we can talk about win rates and conversion rates, but I mean they most definitely went up, right? And I think the biggest thing that we noticed was really salespeople having a much better time doing their job. Especially folks who didn't come with prior experience, either at that level of sales or in the industry. It was, I think, just really empowering, which is a really big ingredient that I think a lot of people are missing today. So it was huge. It was a fun time. And seriously, if we're not having fun in sales, marketing, or customer success, then we're in the wrong job.
Right. What are we doing here? Especially if you're
Right.
in the startup space, like I have to remind myself all the time, this is where I want to be because it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of hours, and it ain't easy. And so,
Oh,
if you're wanting to come in and just do something repetitively, whatever, you may want to look at, more corporate America, climb the ladder side of things. Um, Otherwise, you really should be having fun if you're making this choice. All right, cool. We're up against the hour here. To wrap things up, where can people find you?
LinkedIn is the best place to find me. You can drop me a connection request, shoot me an email. I typically respond to that. I post every morning at 7:57. So you can find me there Monday through Sunday, and posting my unpopular opinions. I will engage with you here if you want to comment. And also you can reach me at james@revcorps.com. That's James at REVCORPS.com. And hit me up. Happy to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, James. It's been an awesome conversation. We definitely need to circle back up on some stuff outside of directly sales or SaaS. Definitely curious to hear the story on the interest and background on the poli sci or philosophy side on your side of it. So let's make sure we
For sure.
reconnect on that.